Okay, perfect. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Dmitry, and I have my co-host today, Angela Brunson. She's with the DA's office. We are doing a seminar on cybercrime, specifically the pandemic of unlawful pornography online. And I, as a defense lawyer, met Angela, well, first as a DA, and then when I went to private practice, I've had cases against Angela, and she's an expert on child pornography prosecutions and cybercrime cases. So we thought it'd be really interesting to present a seminar to attorneys at the Beverly Hills Bar about how cybercrime prosecutions work. You have seen, perhaps in the news recently, there was a guy named Judge Duggar. He had a reality show. He was just convicted in court for possession of child pornography. The subway guy, the spokesperson, he was also convicted of something similar. And I've represented doctors and attorneys and other, white collar professionals, even police officers that have been in trouble for this. So it is a crime du jour. There are many cases like that in the criminal justice system, both in state and federal court. And so it's really an area of law that's being handled all the time in court. So I thought it would be a cool, interesting topic for everyone at the Beverly Hills Bar to understand this aspect of criminal law, because it does pervade both the state and federal system. And so let me introduce Angela. Angela's been a prosecutor for many, many years. She's an expert in these kind of cases. She trains law enforcement. She herself has a caseload of nearly 100 cases in Los Angeles County, just dealing with distribution, possession of child pornography, and related offenses. And so she's really an expert. Police officers are trained by her on how to investigate and prosecute these cases. So she's got a very detailed bullet point presentation on PowerPoint today. She's going to go through that. And during the presentation, I may ask her some questions. Perhaps she'll take down the PowerPoint so we can engage and talk. And I think this will be a very interesting presentation. It's something that most of us, colleagues of mine at the Beverly Hills Bar that are not criminal lawyers, have probably never dealt with. So I'm going to let Angela, please, take it away with your PowerPoint. And then during the presentation, I'll kind of jump in with questions just to kind of keep it interesting. Thank you, Angela.
Great. Can you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a go.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. I've sort of intermingled some of the legal aspects of what I do with handy dandy resources for you out there that may be parents. I'd like to sort of start with hopefully an eye-opening experience. It's a preview from a documentary that's available anywhere online for free. And this is just the preview. And I think it's a really great way to start a conversation with a child about their online activity.
A long time ago, families were in communities. They were local, they were small.
I was born in the very depths of the Great Depression. I was put to work carrying wood, carrying water. I knew how to shell peas, I knew how to break beans. We still didn't have electricity.
I have 2 Instagram accounts.
I use Instagram, Snapchat,
and TikTok.
TikTok and Fortnite.
I can just scroll for hours on end.
11 hours a day.
It's been 8, 9.
Maybe like 12.
It's actually been a way that we can keep track of them out there in the real world where things really are scary.
The lives of kids were sort of changing slowly for a while, and then all of a sudden, those kids were able to get on social media, and that's when everything skyrocketed.
The rates at which they're experiencing problems continues to increase.
We also know that the teen suicide rate increased 56%.
Last year alone, we received over 18 million reports of international and domestic online child sexual abuse.
We have traded a false sense of safety and security for actually putting our kids in riskier situations.
I call it the race to the bottom of the brainstem. So it starts with techniques like pull to refresh.
Pretty much every guy has like an addiction to it, but no one talks about it.
But it's just faster now, and it's younger.
Well, yeah, like nudes of girls go around to school all the time.
At the beginning of the year, there were multiple suicides before school even started.
There were men that wanted to talk to children at all hours of the day and night.
I'm going to be shot.
on Snapchat. One thought it'd be a funny idea to talk the other one into committing suicide, and she did it. She's dead.
After about 6 weeks, we were able to crack his phone.
Kids right now are going to experience the worst of what we're going through.
I'm a little nervous.
The first time.
Do you think your parents know that this happens?
No. My kid won't do that. My kid would never. My kid's school isn't like that. You're wrong.
Because what they see, they feel neurologically compelled to do.
Right now, we're effectively living in an experiment. How is this going to affect us? We'll find out.
I still get chills every time I see that. It's a great documentary, and I encourage you to sort of become aware of the scenario that is my everyday existence if you're not already. Quick trigger warning, some of what we talk about today is meant for mature audiences. So back in the good old days, people my age, Dmitry's age, we were raised with pretty much the worst things on the planet. Good touching, bad touching, stranger danger. Those were the things our parents tried to instill within us. But thanks to the invention of the internet, now there's a lot more riskier things that can happen to children. And I'm here to talk about two of those things, child pornography and online predators. But for the most part, we'll deal with child pornography. I am proud to say that I am part of a very large prosecuting office that was one of the first to create a cybercrime division in order to train and work with these types of cases. So what are we talking about? On the books, it's legally still referred to as child pornography. However, there is a movement to give it a little bit more of an appropriate name, which you'll hear us say CSAM or CSEM, child sexual exploitation material. And that's really more accurate because the word pornography has these connotations about consent that do not apply here. What we're dealing with are actual crime scene videos of children being sexually abused or crime scene photographs. And the legal definition, both at the federal and the California state level, are very similar. It has to involve a real child under the age of 18 engaged in any number of these types of activities defined as sexual conduct. Now, keep in mind, conduct to me sort of suggests more than one person involved, but if you look at the last bullet point there, you'll see that it also involves solo children. So anything that involves the exhibition of genitals, pubic, rectal area for the sexual stimulation of the viewer using an objective person's standard, not what a suspect might admit to being sexually stimulated by. It doesn't matter if the image or video itself does not meet this legal definition. And the other key thing to remember here is it can be an actual or simulated sexual conduct. In other words, X-ray vision glasses are not really required to determine whether or not penetration has occurred. The simple act of an adult or a child lying or sitting on top of the other person, we don't need to know if penetration has happened. That just simple act of sitting or laying is enough to create a sexually simulated act. In this, 6 or so years I've been doing this, I have yet to experience a legal excuse or a get out of jail free card, so to speak. But if someone can successfully assert a legitimate medical, scientific, or educational purpose for having this material, then of course it would not be considered to be a crime. So everything else is what we call erotica. Again, even if the owner or the distributor admits to becoming sexually stimulated by it, these are the types of images or videos that do not rise to the legal definition of illegal material. So how do these cases come to my attention? Humans are one of the reasons. Families, friends, borrowing each other's devices, discovering something inappropriate. Repair technicians, they are not mandated reporters, but if they choose to report it, that's another way it can be discovered. We have a pretty big uptick with our homeless population or folks that do not have access to their own internet capable devices. They often turn to public libraries. So this bigger image here in this slide is taken from the Downtown Central Library Central LAPD uses body cams. The librarian called to say that someone was doing something on the computer that was illegal. And this is one of the few times we actually have captured someone in the act of using a public library for illegal purposes. Now, I've cropped the photograph so you don't see the full screen of what the perpetrator was viewing, but you get the idea. I've received a few cases from IT departments, people at Northrop Grumman or Boeing, even certain police departments using the Wi-Fi for illegal non-work related materials. Or often I'm also seeing a huge uptick in another case brings this type of situation to light. LAPD robbery homicide may call and say, hey, we're interviewing a murder suspect. He gave us consent to search his phone. We were looking for evidence relating to this murder charge or murder investigation, and we came across these types of images or videos. So when you least expect it, often this type of material is discovered. Another way it comes to our attention is it can be reported by a human to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, either through their website at missingkids.org or cybertipline.org, or through a 24-hour phone number. They make it as easy as possible for it to be reported online with a handy dandy drop-down menu for you to select what kinds of improper things are being viewed on the internet. And then the most common way that these cases come to our attention are through websites that report the activity to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. A tiny bit of technical background on how this process starts. Everything that happens on the internet has a hash value, a fingerprint, if you will. So we have a photograph or a drawing of a kitty cat, and a cryptographic hash is assigned to that image. So every time that kitty cat image goes across the internet, the same output of D, E, E, et cetera, 32 byte hash will be created. And that's how the internet sort of marks that, right? Like a DNA cold hit case that you might have heard of. But if you make just one minor change to that same image, now we've taken away some whiskers, it completely changes the cryptographic hash value that is assigned. So images and videos of illegal material are assigned hash values. And every time they cross the information superhighway, alarms may be set off by the websites that find that material hosted throughout its services. So these websites are not mandated to search for this material. However, should they choose to employ like a search device, photo DNA, some kind of algorithm that searches for these hash values, if they choose to search for it, and most of them do because they want you to feel confident about being a subscriber to their services, such as Facebook, Google, Yahoo. So when those websites choose to search it out, if they find it, they are mandated to report it through this process, a website created cyber tip. And this is sort of how that flow of information goes. The websites like Google, Yahoo, Facebook will report it in a cyber tip to the National Center. The National Center will then forward it to law enforcement based on a geolocation, a rough idea of the neighborhood where that activity was occurring. Law enforcement receives the cyber tip and they usually act upon it in a number of different ways. For the most part, they'll try to get the IP address information discovered, right? So who is paying for the internet services to arrive at that location? Maybe it's Mrs. Smith. Now, that may or may not be our suspect, but at least we have a general idea now of where it's happening. Additional search warrants might be issued to get content from the Google account that is suspected of creating the material or distributing the material. And maybe that Google account will return with emails, homework assignments, resumes, bank statements, gas bills, that kind of thing, to give us more insight into the Google subscriber that is alleged to have conducted that activity. And then ultimately a search warrant to search that location for evidence such as digital devices is usually one of the last steps that law enforcement will take before bringing some reports and some evidence to me for my attention and filing consideration. And how prolific is it? Well, this is my 2021 chart of how often cyber tips are being generated on a weekly basis in the United States. And as of the week ending just last week, we hit a new horrific record. We're over 1 million cyber tips for the week that ended in December 4th. So you can see in 2019, in the year 2019, in the United States, there were 16 million cyber tips. In 2020, it increased to 21 million, and we're not done yet with this year, but we're already around 25 million. So it is an ever-growing problem. It is not going to go away. I guess the good news for me and perhaps the defense bar out there is it's definitely some job security for us. So the charges that we have to choose from: possession is 311.11a. It is a wobbler. The bail is $20,000 if it's a felony, and it's 1 count per location. So a suspect can have a device in the bedroom, another device in a kitchen, another device in a living room, and it's an aggregate of all of those devices or what is found on just one of those devices. It's not 3 counts for 3 devices. It's not necessarily 1 count per image. It's what I call a curtilage rule, if you will. 1 count per location, and there's the case website, case site if you're interested in where that comes from. There's a little bit of what we call an aggravated count if the suspect's devices are found to contain over 601 images. That is C1, 601 C1. 1 video counts as 50 images, no matter whether the video itself is 3 seconds long, or it could be 10 videos spliced together to create 1 24-hour-long video file. It's still 1 video file counts as 50 images. So you can see it only takes 13 videos times 50 images, and now we're over the threshold. We're at 650 images. The other aggravated count is C2, and I use the reference of OO, C2 OO, to remember that C2 means possession of sadomasochistic materials. So this is stuff that involves the infliction of pain for sexual gratification, whether it's a child having trouble breathing because of the weight of an adult on them, or choking or crying, yelling no in any number of different languages. You get the idea, duct tape, bondage types of stuff. So those are the main possession types of counts. There is one more aggravated or a completely different count, and that is anyone who's had a prior 311 conviction in their past, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, or if a person has had any prior conviction that requires them to register as a sex offender in the state of California. 1 image in that particular person's device brings up the B count. And this is important for you as defense attorneys to explain to your first timers that you definitely don't want them to come back as a repeat customer, because they're now facing straight felony with state prison time. This is a charge that custody time cannot be served locally. That would be a state prison under 1170H. And then there's a distribution count, which is what we were talking about before with regard to the cyber tips. That's 311.1A, and it too is a wobbler. And it's usually, it can be charged any number of ways. It can be 1 count per image that has been sent, 1 count per platform that has been used, 1 count per person that has received an image. It's sort of up to a prosecutorial's discretion as to how to charge the distribution counts. You can see that if there's 5 images that have been distributed, very quickly the bail could rise to $100,000 for just those 5 images. Different offenses that are committed on different dates means bail can be stacked. So maybe on January 1st, someone is alleged to have distributed 1 image, and then by the time the search warrants have been thrown out there and information has been returned, and by the time the search warrant for the residence has returned more images on a device, maybe that's now March, April, or June. So we have a distribution allegation in January of $20,000 plus a possession of perhaps over 600 images in June, and that would add $40,000 more to the bail. So again, it very quickly can rise to a pretty high level of bail. When we dispo or settle these cases, there are mandatory terms under the Penal Code that need to be included. In general, the felonies are getting the 2 years of formal felony probation. It used to be 5, but then AB 1950 came along. And just so you know, the 311 charges do not rise to any kind of exception for reduction of probation from a 5-year term for a felony to now a 2-year. And the same goes for if it's a misdemeanor disposition under AB 1950, that grant would be a 1-year term of summary probation. There is a mandatory 290 registration for a felony. It's a tier 3, meaning lifetime registration. There is a mandatory felony term that includes a minimum of 52 weeks of approved sex offender counseling under 1203.067B. That does not apply to a misdemeanor, but in general, you'll see us ask for that term of 52 weeks of sex offender counseling to be imposed. There is an internet identification registration under 290.024. So in addition to the thumbprint, fingerprints, and the 290 registration at the local police or sheriff, the convicted offender would also have to register their Gmail account address or their Facebook screen name and keep those social media and email account names current, just like they would with their location, their address, under a 290 sex offender registration. Devices that were seized that contain illegal material are subject to being forfeited and or destroyed under 312 and 502.01. Search and seizure terms, which would include their electronic devices under Penal Code 1546. There's a mandatory $300 fine for a first-time conviction under 290.3. First, second conviction, or third or fourth, it is $500 under 290.3. And try as you might, and I do respect you for your efforts, there is no expungement ever, whether it is a misdemeanor conviction or a felony conviction of a 311 offense, and that is prohibited under 1203.4B. So no offense, but please don't waste your paper trying to file those types of motions. They will be denied. The jury instructions, the elements of these offenses are kind of what intuitively you would expect. The distribution count would apply to any time this material is shown to someone else. So we do receive cyber tips from cloud storage accounts such as Dropbox. That is still probable cause for us to seek out a search warrant for the residence and find evidence of possession. There's also a theory of there is a possession count just based on what is contained within the Dropbox. However, Dropbox is not the same as distributing it to another person. So don't assume that just because a client has a Dropbox cyber tip that is the basis for a charge, that it's an illegal charge. It's usually going to be grounds for a possession charge. Just like I might have, which I don't, but for instance, illegal material in a safe deposit box at the bank. I am constructively in possession of that illegal material, even if it's not sitting right here in my pocket or on my desk. I didn't give it to anyone. I didn't distribute it to anyone, but it is a possessed item constructively. And then of course, the possession count is again, what you would think. The defendant knew that he possessed it. I have yet to see a successful, I don't know how that got there, defense. Often these files are going into user created folders. In other words, a suspect might name a folder wedding album. Oh, they'll never look there. And it's not in fact any images of a wedding. Perhaps the suspect was never even married. It's just a place that they are storing their personal collection of the material. So that is a summary of 311. Another specialty I have awareness and some knowledge about is the online predator situation, which we're also seeing, thanks in part to the pandemic, a huge increase, because in real life, predators go physically where children are, swimming pools, beaches, amusement parks. Well, thanks to the pandemic, it's gotten a little easier for predators to find children because a lot of them are spending much more time on the internet. So the predators have followed suit. A lot of times they're going to, if they go to a park or an amusement park or a beach, there aren't that many children there during a pandemic, right? They're online. So it's essentially, you know, harvest time on the internet. So how do we catch these perpetrators? Often we do sting operations. You may be familiar with the show To Catch a Predator or spin-offs of something like that. And so this is a quick case study on one of those scenarios. A member of our LAPD Vice unit put something on Craigslist in 2018, posing as Jasmine. Who's bored? I'm Panay, Asian American, Filipino, a cute, petite woman for man, casual encounter. I'm bored. I'm seeing who's out there. I'm young. I'm definitely mature. I'm kind of skinny, super cute. I'm for real. So once that post went live on Craigslist, it took less than an hour for 120 responses to start flowing in. One of those responses that caught our attention was from someone named Johnny. Hey there, I'm really attracted to young, skinny Panay girls. I'm tall, 6'4", hung and clean. I'm educated and respectful. Like he's respectfully letting Jasmine know that he's hung. Maybe we can chat and see if we get along, and here's a picture. And that is in fact Johnny, and he seems to be a relatively normal looking human being. So the communication moves from the Craigslist email exchange to phone numbers. And Jasmine says that she's 16. Johnny says he's 35. And this is on within 24 hours, right? The post went up on the 3rd. We're now on January 4th. She says, that's not too old. I've hung out with 35-year-olds before, but to be honest, I'm going to be 17 in April. So Jasmine is saying she is 16, or the detective posing as Jasmine. As soon as Johnny hears Jasmine's age and has a perfectly good opportunity to stop communicating, block the number, say, you know, call me back when you're 18, he doesn't. He says, that's fine. I like younger girls. It's not an issue. I've never hung out with a 16. Do you have some pictures? I don't think I'm creepy. They never think they're creepy, right? We're now on day 2. We're 48 hours in. I'm a very nice guy, as long as you don't think a 35-year-old having sexual intercourse with a 16-year-old isn't creepy, LOL. That might be the world's most inappropriate use of LOL, laughing out loud, that I think I've ever seen. It sounds like you need some more experience. I know how we can fix that. Do you want to trade some more pictures? When do you want to meet? So this is very typical of what you might have heard us refer to as grooming. I like to use the word manipulation. It's a little bit more apropos. It's an adult posing as, I want to help you. I want to teach you things. You can trust me. Send me photos, right? Gaining a sense of trust and perhaps secrecy between the adult and the child. And now about 4 days in, Johnny sends one of many inappropriate images of full face, full body, nothing left to the imagination at all, which, by the way, is a violation of a felony, Penal Code 288.2 sub A, sending illegal, obscene material to a minor. So this is the undercover recent graduate from the LAPD Academy that we used as a photo of Jasmine. And these are just some of the things that I, as a prosecutor, think are relatively golden nuggets of evidence to help prove my case against Johnny. He says things like, I want to do all kinds of things to you, rip off your clothes, you should take more pictures of yourself in underwear sometime for me, what time works for you, I don't want to get caught by anyone, haha. Are you okay with me getting you naked the second we meet? Everything about this is wrong, but that turns me on even more. So that's just a sampling of some of the more PG-13 stuff that I use in this presentation. And at this point, I always like to ask you to imagine in your mind what kind of person you envision Johnny, right? We've seen a photograph of him, that is him, but what kind of occupation or status do you think this person holds in life, right? And when I give this presentation to high schoolers, they're rather sarcastic and they may throw out, oh, I think he's a Catholic priest, haha. Elementary schoolers, middle schoolers often envision Johnny as someone with, scales and claws or missing teeth and greasy hair or some kind of monster, right? So this is the moment where it's, pin drop. Here's Johnny. Johnny was employed as a physician resident at a Long Beach hospital. So the purpose of this part of the slide presentation is to sort of emphasize that with children being online, even people who supposedly hold a position of trust, authority, or respect in our community cannot necessarily be trusted with what they're doing online. They don't have a neon sign across their forehead saying, I'm a predator. And if they are manipulating on children's favorite thing in the world, right? They're joining My Little Pony fan club websites, or they're using a profile picture of Justin Bieber, and that might be the one thing that that particular child would never say no to. You can see how it's a recipe for disaster. The other platform that we're seeing more and more being used by the perpetrators, online gaming, especially online gaming systems that allow for chatting, communication, of child's wearing headphones, thinking that they're not disturbing the family, but the family is now unable to hear what kinds of things are being said. What's your phone number? You have a pretty profile picture. Here's an extra life. Here's some more ammo for us to continue playing this game. Now you owe me, right? You're a child. I've given you a gift, or I've said something nice to you. We're not strangers. We're on the same platforms. And so when the perpetrator asks the child for a favor in return, the child is often, has that sense of wanting to please an adult, not wanting to disappoint, and a sense of obligation. You gave me something, I must give you something. So when you ask for my phone number, my address, a picture of me, it's very easy to see how the child is sort of pre-programmed to comply with that request.
Hey, Angela, I just have a quick question here. What happened to the doctor? So obviously, the text messages were disturbing. What happens to a person like that? Obviously, we're all attorneys. I think the two things that really jump out at me is anybody can get in trouble for this. To me, from a defense lawyer's perspective, a lot of it has to do with online addiction and pornography addiction, and then they kind of go down the rabbit hole of child porn. But what, as an example with this doctor, what happened to him? Did he get treatment? Can he turn his life around in a way that this horrible conduct is perhaps a wake-up call for him, that he's got this horrible pornography addiction? Give us some insight as to that.
Well, he had the mandatory terms that I mentioned, even though it wasn't a 311 count that he was charged with. The 288.82 counts do also entail those same mandatory things. So he was sentenced to a term that included 52 weeks of mandatory sex offender counseling. He had to do some time in custody. And as far as his future, rehabilitation odds, the problem is no one's crystal ball is accurate with regard to prediction of that. It's up to him whether he chooses to embrace the counseling, or is he sitting there, arms crossed, ticking off, 52 sessions to go, 49 sessions to go. He had some collateral consequences, of course, as you can imagine, from the medical board, and perhaps needing to find a new career. But that in general, we do the best we can with what the law imposes upon us, and hope for the best.
So he got probation and some treatment. He didn't go to jail, but obviously
he did
go to jail. Okay. He lost his job, lost his license to practice. And in what percentage of your cases is people that download pornography actually have direct contact with kids? Do you know what I'm saying? Because a lot of my CP cases, it's just a lot of people are downloading. I'd say for me, it's like 80–90% they're downloading. It's illegal. It's an addiction to pornography. What percentage of your cases do you actually see there's pornography, but also there's actually the next step of having contact with the kids?
When I started at Cyber in May of 2016, I would say 1% had that crossover. Now I'm pretty confident to tell you that it's closer to 20%. Often I'm co-prosecuting cases with sex crimes DAs, and they're prosecuting molest or hands-on, and their investigation led to the discovery of material that, you know, I'm familiar with in my world. So they handle the live victim, the, you know, victim support services, and I handle the part of the case involving digital stuff. Or there's a vice versa, right? The investigation into my world may lead to the discovery of chats with minors or the interview of minors that the perpetrator has access to, who end up disclosing, thanks to the well-trained detectives that work in our world. They have to be prepared to deal with both real life, hands-on child victims, as well as material of other victims who are being recycled throughout the internet.
Got it. And one more question. In terms of rehabilitation for these folks that are professionals, be it police officers, I've seen lawyers, doctors, other people that have established, you know, have had a reasonably successful life, no prior record, assuming they go through the treatment, assuming they haven't had contact with kids, that it's just an online pornography addiction. How many of those people do you actually see reoffend or are, you know, they're recidivists because they're doing the same thing again, assuming they're successful with treatment?
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it is a disturbingly large number of repeat offenders. I have 2 cases right now where the perpetrators are on their 4th 311 offense. They've gone to prison for 288s. I mean, you can understand that when you see what our sample disposition is, it's our effort at getting help, right? Our number one goal is always rehabilitation.
Right.
Now, the federal system is a little different. There's a bit more of a punishment that they dole out. There are mandatory minimum terms in federal prison. So the good news is when Dmitry gets a case and he realizes I have filed it, he usually skips into the courtroom and gives me a hug because he realizes his client is not looking at mandatory minimum terms in federal prison of 10, 15 years. However, when it's a 2nd, 3rd, 4th offender, you realize we're out of options. We've given them the help opportunity. If they've chosen not to embrace it, or their addiction is so, you know, pervasive, really at the state level, we have no other choice but to warehouse them and hope that it doesn't progress, because again, no one's crystal ball is clear as to whether this is someone who is just, and I'm saying that a little sarcastically, because even recycling victims on the internet, you're still victimizing them again. So whether they are just recycling victims that already exist or likely to commit a hands-on offense, there's, depending on what study you read, there's a correlation of, you know, 50% of the ones who are just charged with CSAM possession or distribution will later admit to actual hands-on. Many of my perpetrators are interviewed during a CSAM investigation and they admit to masturbating to these images. I mean, you can see where there's a concern for what the future behavior might be and what are the chances that the rehabilitation is being said or heard by them in a way to impact them, get a hold of some sexual compulsive issues, control some triggers. Now combine those problems with low self-esteem, being stuck in a home all day, maybe not having job skills, social skills, maybe being depressed, lacking social confidence, being a bit awkward, spending too much time growing up in this day and age on the internet and not having real life friends, and having just this whole world of too much time on your hands and making bad decisions on the internet. Combine that with narcotic use, drug addiction, and now we have 2 barriers to break through before the chances of a successful rehabilitation improve.
I agree. I just want to make a comment about what Angela said. The federal system is a lot more punitive. So our federal cases, there's usually custody time. If it does go federal, sometimes it really depends on the detective, whether he wants to bring to state court or to federal court. I mean, it really just, and it also depends on how busy the federal prosecutors are. So there is a disparity in punishment. And as to a lot of my clients, I find rehabilitation or treatment has really helped. I haven't had any recidivists with us, with my firm, unless they did not do the treatment. Then we had one individual who ended his life. It was tragically, he did not do the treatment we told him he needed to do. And another individual was downloading pornography in the middle of his jury trial. because he never got the treatment. So there are two cases I can think of in my firm where lack of treatment really did not end well for the clients. The other folks, the dozens of other cases we've handled where folks have gotten treatment, we haven't seen any recidivism with our clients.
So I just had someone plead with tears streaming down his face on September 1st. And he cried so hard during this plea that I thought he was going to waterboard himself with his mask being so soaked. September 1st, October 11th, probation compliance search, tons more of child sexual abuse material. Right. And you just, again, crystal ball, there is none, right?
Yeah, I think it's up to an attorney to make sure their client does what they're supposed to do. That being said, you know, some of these therapists, they're so busy now, it's hard to actually get an appointment for your client to get some of this treatment. But anyway, I digress. I just wanted to pop in with some questions. Angela, please proceed, and then we'll do some more questions later. I thought it was a nice way to break it up. Please go ahead.
So what I try to put out there is as much preventative information as I can to sort of help ease my caseload. The more I can get your clients away from these behaviors and the more I can keep children safe, the less likely they're going to show up on my desk. This is all stuff that I think most adults know is common sense, but I really want to stress one of them, which is don't post personal photos. You know, in this day and age, with everybody turning to no other alternatives but social media to interact with people, there's a lot of oversharing. And I want you to think about what you're posting or what you're seeing posted through the eyes of a perpetrator. I get it. You're super proud that your kid made honor roll or your child has the cutest Halloween costume, but does the whole world need to know that? You know, what are those privacy settings? Have you just put the name of your child, what they look like, perhaps with their school mentioned or their school uniform on, out for the whole world to see, including the bad guys? So, you know, share that information with your trusted loved ones, maybe perhaps via text messages, group chats, or emails, not necessarily social media. So for instance, I just gave a presentation to a school administration at Edgewood Schools, and one of the school administrators didn't know I was about to do this, but I can do, without using any kind of special law enforcement database, anybody can do this. Type in your name, see what's out there on you. And because this particular school administrator had a rather unusual name, in a matter of 2 seconds, one click after I typed her name, I knew her age, all of her phone numbers, her address. I could see where she lived on a street map. I knew the names of her social media accounts. I could tell that she'd recently had, in May of 2009, she'd had a child. Right now, if I'm gathering this kind of information about her through publicly available resources, imagine what you can gather about yourself, and more importantly, imagine what the bad guys out there can gather. And this goes not just for information about your loved ones or your children, but about you and yourself, right? Are you posting a photograph of your new car where your address is visible in the background? Are you posting to a site that has data attached to that image with GPS coordinates that people can use to figure out where that image was taken? Do you even know that that exists, right? Your location settings being turned on your cellular device when you take an image shares so much information about the day, time, and location and device used to take that image that most people aren't really aware of, but the bad guys are. So here's what I try to put out there again to reduce the amount of these types of material, these types of offenses, for the purpose of reducing your chances of being taken advantage of online, your personal information being out there. Give yourself a homework assignment, right? Go to familytree.now or Google your name, Google your phone number, Google your address, your children's names, right? Go to your children's schools' social media accounts. Are your children being depicted on the school's Instagram? How do you feel about that? Was there a permission slip given to you at the beginning of the school year that you just blindly signed? Maybe you weren't really aware of how a perpetrator might use that information, but now that you are, can you revoke that permission? These are just some of the websites that are out there. So each website will have a requirement that if you read through the fine print, usually scrolling down to the very bottom and clicking on something like privacy, opt out, remove me, there's some hurdles that you're going to have to go through to get your information taken off. My my tip that I like to give out is, twice a year we change our clocks. And during that time, we're supposed to also check our batteries and our smoke detectors. Well, if we're keeping our personal home safe from things like that, why not also use that time to do a personal internet safety checkup, right? Google yourself, Google the ones you love, your personal identifying information like a phone number, see what's out there. Check it again when you turn the clocks again, and see if other data has been sold from one company to another that you maybe weren't aware of 6 months prior. Go through those steps again. And you have to be persistent and keep doing this every 6 months or more often, depending on how much you value your privacy. Safety tip number 4, I call it the money test. Do not befriend anyone online who you don't know enough in real life to feel comfortable lending or borrowing money. And I challenge you to set a good example on social media for the children. You cannot reasonably expect a child to refrain from befriending 500 strangers if they look to your social media account and they don't recognize anybody other than perhaps your spouse or your brother and sister who are their aunt or uncle. So, by passing the money test and instilling that idea or that lesson upon your children as they become more involved on social media, maybe that will help prevent someone who they thought was a trustworthy doctor from being their friend. My cyber life safety tip number 3. Everything you put out there is forever and ever. So when your child isn't getting into Stanford or Princeton, despite being on the honor roll and being a great kid, it's because they're checking your social media and your child's social media. And maybe your child's twerking skills weren't exactly the criteria that they were looking for in their new admissions. Same thing goes for you. Maybe your application to get a job at the bank is denied because you posted something about a certain political candidate that the owner of the bank doesn't necessarily agree with you in that regard. It's all out there and it's permanent. Whether you've deactivated an account, closed an account, it is archived. And I guarantee you, people who care about whether you are permitted to join their organization or whether your child is permitted to be accepted in their school, they will find it. Again, kind of leading off of that, cyber tip number 2, it is permanent, right? Once you put the tea bag in the cup of hot water, you will never get the tea out of the water. So when you post things about your baby girl being a student at a certain school and the homecoming princess, and we know your first name, we know your last name, we now know what your child looks like, the perpetrators can simply drive by that school, describe your child by name, by the fact that she was the homecoming princess, and hey, random child, I'm looking for this baby girl, the one who her mom is named Tiffany. She was the homecoming queen. And anyway, her mom, Tiffany, sent me over here to pick her up. Have you seen her? Right? You can very easily see how that kind of information is really not meant for public consumption. My last and most important, sextortion is also on the rise. And when children are asked to create illegal new material, they're doing so behind closed doors. So allowing a child to go to bed at night with an internet-capable device is literally like letting the boogeyman, all of the boogeyman on the internet, not only in this country, but in all of the countries, have access to your child. Using a Wi-Fi password that changes so that if you insist on allowing your child to have a device in the bedroom, or more importantly, in the bathroom, then you might want to think about how to turn that ability to connect with the world on and off at certain times of the day or night. You might want to check your child's phones, see who their friends are. I mean, there's any number of ways to find out, but usually it's after the fact. So try to perhaps think about being more preventative. If a child is playing a gaming system, the sound needs to be audible to everyone. Devices should be in common areas, right? I was raised in an era where I was not allowed to have a boy in my room with a closed door. Whether we were studying or praying or what, it just wasn't permitted. So if that sounds sort of familiar, well, why would you then allow all of the boys or all of the girls or all of the men or all of the women in the world to have access to your child if you wouldn't let your child go behind closed doors with one person. So I get asked this question a lot. When is my child ready to have an internet capable device? And you might think my answer is, well, if they know about, where babies come from, yeah, hit them up. Yeah, sure, go for it. But here's the problem. When you talk to your kid or when they learn about, human reproduction, it's generally not the real thing. And online, they will be exposed to that. So are they emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally equipped to handle just that issue? If the answer is yes, ask yourself, are they also emotionally, spiritually equipped to handle images of children or animals being abused, people walking into an oncoming train, car crashes, blood, guts, gore, crime scenes, the cartel murder fields or suicides, bondage, rough sex, very rough sex, rape, and then the worst one, or one of the worst ones, the stupid online challenges, right? Of course, your child would never eat a Tide Pod, right? That's ridiculous. Well, somebody's child did. Actually, a lot of children did. Of course, your child would never participate in the blue whale challenge, carving something into their arm. But many children did. Of course, your child would never take the, suffocate challenge, but lots of children did, and they're dead. So, I mean, we've all heard, well, if Johnny jumped off a cliff, would you too? And this is that, but to a life or death degree. So I guess the answer is your kid is ready for this world on the internet if they can handle, and if you're confident in their abilities to process what is real, what's not real, what's a good idea, what's a not good idea, and how to discuss what happens when they discover these images. They will be traumatized. And are you equipped to handle that traumatization without blaming them, without punishing them, and simply just taking away their device? Because that's not a permanent solution. And the next time something awkward or inappropriate that they sense happens to them on the internet, you will not be the trusted adult that they seek out in order to discuss it, because you're just going to take their phone away. You're going to blame them. So here are some resources. Before you decide to lock your child in a basement until they're 30 without an internet capable device, let me assure you that there are plenty of good places to allow your child to roam free on the internet, and for you yourself to roam on the internet to find strength and knowledge. Obviously, missingkids.org, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they're not just an intake situation of what to do if, they also put out a lot of educational awareness. They have age-appropriate videos, games, activities. So when I grew up without the internet, we had this habit of I would get in bed and my parent would read to me for like 30 minutes every night. Why not have that moment to bond with a kid, grab a tablet, tuck them in, and watch one of these exercises together, discuss it, let them know that you are their trusted adult, that they can speak with you about this stuff that happens on the internet. I'm going to, just for the sake of time, this is just a video about like one girl sent one picture to her boyfriend, but then that boyfriend spread it to the rest of the school, including her younger brother who told her mom, and the trauma and the domino effect of that. There's many of these out there on missingkids.org. So maybe find one that seems appropriate for perhaps the situation you're concerned about, watch it, and then share it with your child and use it as an opportunity to discuss and prevent. Again, for the sake of time, feel free, grab your phone, take a screenshot. I think we're recording this so you can come back to it and access some of these suggestions later for resources, ideas. I'm a big fan of Run Wild My Child because I grew up, I played outdoors. I was a Girl Scout. We had to dip a string in candle for hours. Dip a string in hot wax for hours until it made a candle. We learned different birds and we collected leaves and we made collages. Anyway, Run Wild My Child has a lot of those ideas. Create a scavenger hunt in your backyard. Get your kid away from a screen. Safe Surfing is a ICAC detective. She's retired, but she has kids, and she's a big fan of how to do online, device safety checks. Now, she maybe pushes that idea out, like, say, every Wednesday, check your kids' devices. I'm a bigger fan of perhaps a random check, right? If your kid knows you're going to check their stuff on a Wednesday, maybe they're going to delete a few things every Tuesday night. The Carly Ryan Foundation is a beautiful woman, Sonia Ryan, who has used a tragedy that happened to her daughter because of an online predator to create a foundation to spread awareness to parents. I use this resource to keep up with every platform, because as we speak, a new phone is being invented, a new game is being invented, a new social media is being invented. I've never even heard of Apex Legends, right? Or Among Us, but I have heard of Instagram. Well, even if I've heard of Instagram, well, what is it? What are the safety features? How can I exclude my child from being friended by strangers? There are handy dandy resource sheets on the Carly Ryan Foundation's website. Plus, it's an amazing story, and it's a very courageous woman. And thanks to her tragedy and her courage, we can learn from what she endured, and she is spreading that kind of knowledge. You can simply Google how to keep my kids safe online. I haven't read any of these books, okay? This is just me copying and pasting things that I've come across. I do have my own copy of Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. I think it's a great way to get a very young child aware of what people are doing on screens and when there are good things on those screens and what to do if bad things are discovered on those screens. The trailer from the movie I showed you earlier in the presentation, they have a whole website, Childhood 2.0, and they've got a great handbook. You know, as your child gets older, they're going to need to know, especially for us attorneys here, about the value of a contract, right? Maybe one day they're going to sign a lease for an apartment or purchase a vehicle or sign a financial document to get a law school loan, fingers crossed, right? Well, why not instill upon them the value of a social media contract? You can draft one yourself, your attorneys. You can find one online, tailor it to your needs, decide what rules you would like to implement. No Wi-Fi until homework is done, or Wi-Fi for certain hours, or, you know, whatever you want. But I think because your attorneys, perhaps depending on the age of your child, a social media contract might be something you want to explore. There's plenty of games that you can turn your kid loose on the internet. You know, I get it. We use phones often as pacifiers, like, just shut up, let me do some work here. Here's my phone, play away, shop away, call Japan, whatever. But maybe, you know, set some parameters. I'm a big fan of the Google Interland game. There are 4 islands with amazing graphics. Each island is an educational experience about what stays private online, and the kids have to jump over hurdles to learn about what should and shouldn't be private. There's a be nice to everyone, don't cyberbully kind of themed island. You get the idea. Now, for us lazier parents out there, if you want some ideas to come to your phone, go to Thorn, sign up, and you will get text messages with suggestions on safety tips without having to actively go seek it out. Bark is one of those filters and subscriber services that you can purchase and install on your devices, your kids' devices. You can set age appropriate yes places and no places to go, blah, 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 blah. And again, obviously, I'm a big fan of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. You can, by the way, set up your Amazon account so that a portion of your purchases goes back to NCMEC. They are a charitable organization. They survive on donations. They keep us, me employed, and they keep those of you with a lot of 311 clients also employed. A few more games.
Hey, Angela, what about if they're with other kids, right? So, you know, in your house, you kind of have more control, you know, but they could be at another kid's house or looking at another kid's cell phone.
Right. And the same is true for a lot of schools are using a Google Chromebook. A child is issued a notebook, and those do come equipped with lots of safety features.
Right.
Those safety features do not carry over to the child's personal device, nor do they carry over to the child's friends' personal devices. So yeah, you know, everybody thinks my child would never, just like we saw in that preview for the trailer. My kid's school isn't like that. My child isn't like that. Sure, I agree with you. I would love to think that about your child, but how well do you know your children's friends.
Right.
So I've seen, like we used to set up play dates, like, hey, everybody's going to meet in the park and we'll bring our dogs and we'll have a picnic and the kids can run around and play Frisbee. The same can be done online. You can become a trusted friend of another parent who has a similar age child and agree that your child and their child will meet online to play Fortnite or whatever they're playing, and the other parent will agree that they're not to befriend anyone else, and that one parent will be present and be able to hear the conversation that the two children are having while the other parent can go run some errands. And it's essentially like online babysitting. So create those play dates. You just have to get a little more creative on how you're going about it with regards to screen time.
Right. Okay.
And then the last bit of information I really feel is important is, well, there's two. What to do if. So when the child has, something that you've discovered that's not appropriate, obviously stay calm. You want to be the trusted, calm parent who's not going to lash out at the child. Understandably so, but it's sending the wrong message. Put the device in airplane mode. Don't take a photo of it with your device, because now your device becomes evidence. And God forbid, you're taking a photo of a nude photo that your child sent to someone else, and you're using one phone, yours, to take a picture of your child's phone. Now you may be put in possession of child pornography, and that there's no legal excuse. Sorry, I'm an upset parent. I get to possess my child's pornography. No, that doesn't, as you recall from the earlier slide, that's not a legal excuse. So here's the other thing I see often. The parent takes the child device and says, hey, a-hole or jerk or whatever, she's 12. Well, guess what the perpetrator is now about to do? Delete device, rip up SIM card, throw device in ocean, delete accounts, and make it so much harder, probably impossible, for us as prosecutors and investigators to track down that person, bring them a criminal case that allows them to receive opportunities at rehabilitation, like the mandated sex offense counseling. So you've really just, in a sense, enabled that perpetrator to go out, buy a new device, and be more careful about who he chooses, which kids he chooses to befriend online. And please remember, it's not the child's fault. So if your child is standing on the corner and that white van comes along and scoops up your child against his or her will, would you blame your child for that? No. Just like the online scenario, your child is being groomed, manipulated. They're being shown the one thing that they really, really want, and you can't blame them for falling prey. But you just can be a little bit more involved, maybe employ some preventive measures. Obviously watching over them every moment of their screen time is very difficult, but you've got to do something. So those are my suggestions. Put it in airplane mode, take it to your local police agency, and let us handle it from there. You mentioned some cases in the news. This was leading into my final, what I feel is pretty important about this. It's a news video. I'll skip it, but this is Mark Saling. He was charged in Los Angeles. He was known for being on Glee. And while he was awaiting sentencing for federal child pornography charges, he killed himself. And this is happening more and more. You're just only hearing about the ones that are well-known people. So as a result of this, what I've done is I've created a list of resources. Maybe we can prevent some potential clients landing on your caseload as well as mine. I have this in a PDF form. I can send it to Dmitry, or I think the Beverly Hills Bar Association will have it at some point, and or you can take a picture of it right now and explore these. What we're trying to do is when we're executing those search warrants, we're leaving copies of stuff like this so that family members, suspects, whether we file a case or not, maybe at the very least, they can use the internet for good instead of for bad.
Angela, go ahead.
That's it. That's what I have.
Oh, thank you, Angela. Can you take if you can take the thing off?
Yes.
Perfect. I just have some questions here that you mentioned at the beginning, that there's some sort of, I don't know, a defense or an excuse one of our viewers said about medical, scientific, artistic. as a defense or an explanation or justification for possession. I had a case where a client actually brought us, this was a case initially was going to be federal, then went state. It was a 10-year-old case where he brought us actual books where I didn't even know these books existed, where they're like published books of like entire families, like nudist families. And everyone is photographed by the river. I mean, it was like, I'd never seen, it's some artist in the 70s or 80s. Okay.
Right.
So
That doesn't rise to the legal definition though. It's not for the sexual stimulation of the viewer. Nudism and animated non-real children. Those are what we call erotica. Right. Naked families standing arm in arm at the beach or in front of a cabin. That is not for the sexual stimulation of the viewer. Similar to like the pictures maybe you have of your children in the bathtub. You did not take those images for the sexual stimulation of the viewers, much like the nudist family or the colony is enjoying their religious value or freedoms or their beliefs to stand or walk around naked and take a photo of it. It's very different. It's kind of like that smell test, right? When you compare nude families standing arm in arm, we don't have a center zoomed in close up of like a child's genitals, right? Below the waist, rectal, genital, pubic area for the sexual stimulation of the viewer. We don't see objects or animals licking or penetrating, right? There's a very
when I take pictures of my kids in the bathtub, I make sure to stay away exactly after having seen all these cases. I'm like, just, you know, you got to be extra careful. Right. No,
I want to assure you, take all those pictures of your kids in the bathtub. They are adorable. And when I do come across those pictures in a collection of a suspect's material, it's a lovely relief. I'm getting paid to not look at child sexual abuse material.
Well, and I just want to say, as a defense lawyer, having seen in the course of representing these cases, once you've seen it once or twice, you can't unview it. These horrible images. So there's no a scientific reason anybody would have it or a legitimate reason. They're very disturbing images. I assume that a lot of defense lawyers, if there is a trial on this, that it's usually a technical argument that, hey, I didn't download it or somebody else downloaded it. And it's a possession situation, you know, not by me, by somebody else. So one other question from one of our viewers about mandating web browser folks, you know, Google, Yahoo, to report it. I said to her, well, they're public companies. They're going to report it. Their terms of use are such that they have to report, like Google can close down your account if you're sharing this stuff and they report it. But question is it federally mandated that Google, Yahoo, other service providers actually report this information to NCMEC or not? And should it be lawful? Should it be now?
It is federally mandated that they report it, not that they search for it though.
I see. Okay, I understand. Let me see if I have any other questions here from viewers or
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not good enough at this whole Zoom.
No, that's okay.
Questions and answer them. So
Angela, thank you. I've been going through the questions as you've been talking because I've had time here listening as well as, so I think we've answered most questions. I think the number one thing for our viewers is keeping kids safe, and you've discussed it. You've given us some materials. B, what is the crime of child pornography? A lot of us who don't do criminal law may never have come across it. So you've answered that really well and given us some good perspective. And then C, if somebody is accused of it, from my perspective, about treatment and rehabilitation, immediate, you know, that case you put up with the actor, I'm very, very well aware of it. And so, you know, I find this has been a pretty interesting discussion and very educational to us as attorneys. And I appreciate your time. Do you have any other comments or closing remarks for the Beverly Hills Bar and the attendees?
I just want to thank all of you who I may have worked with or hope to work with in the future. What I do love about this assignment is I feel that it's unlike other assignments where it's a bit more adversarial between myself and defense. This is, and I'm not just saying this, I truly feel like I'm on the same team often with the defense attorneys because we both want what's best for the client for the sake of our community's safety and the rehabilitation of the client, and with the hopes that we don't see the client back with a a recurring offense, or hopefully not a escalating offense. So I think that what's important is we try to assess the client, find out what the needs are. Is there a narcotic issue that's maybe a trigger or the underlying spur to find us in our situation? Was the client previously perhaps sexually traumatized as a child and it was not disclosed? Are there are there bits of unfinished business there? There are support groups out there. So can we plug in something that would help the client get a hold of that scenario and perhaps prevent repeated behavior in the future? So I feel like when we don't see a client back, that myself and the defense attorney have succeeded and done the best we could for a client. And when I do see a client back, I feel like, was there something I could have done? Was there a program I could have suggested? Sometimes it's just the client wasn't being honest, or he wasn't embracing the opportunity for help, but I still take it personally. I feel like we have failed some way. So I just want to thank you guys for, not treating us as adversaries, at least in this regard. When I think we both are on the same page as far as getting the best results for the client and his future, but also for rehabilitation and education, right? Using the internet for good.
Angela, I agree with you. I've had clients that have come back to us, to my firm, and they are just thankful that we got them along the right path with treatment and rehabilitation, and they actually feel better. It's just like with any other addiction, gambling, alcohol, drugs. Some people really need to hit a low, or they do hit a low. And then after that low, they get the treatment, they commit to rehabilitation, and then their life, it's like a monkey off their back, because this was a clinical urge to go online and do something illegal, just like it's a clinical urge, an unhealthy urge for alcoholics, drug abusers, gamblers. They can't not do it. It dominates their life. And so by getting them the treatment, they're actually getting freedom from the addiction and from this very unhealthy behavior, so they can lead a normal life. So we're on the same page.
I like to think of it as hopefully an improved life. Every now and then I get thank you letters from wives, spouses, brothers, sisters. Oh, he's so much more communicative now. He's like the guy I met and fell in love with back in college. He doesn't spend all this time in the man cave. So, those are what I consider to be success stories.
All right, Angela, listen, thank you so much for the presentation. We all from the Beverly Hills Bar really appreciate it. Thank you. You've given us a lot of information most of the attendees have never heard of. And so this is very educational. It gives us also resources for me with small kids to be able to, teach my kids and have my wife be part of it. So thank you so much, Angela, and I'll see you in court soon. And everyone with the Beverly Hills Bar, thank you guys for joining us on this call, on this Zoom. Thank you. Everyone have a great afternoon.